So something that's something in my own research that really interests me, Dan, is the whole question of love. And in Max Scheler's phenomenology, love plays a central role. And also in the philosophy of Plato, love plays a really important role. And um I guess I want to go into a bit of a discussion about love here, because we've talked a bit about how von Hildebrand's concept that distinction between what is subjectively satisfying and what is objectively valuable, and also between the different well springs of motivation in the soul according to Plato, the appetites and reason and this thymos. Um, you know, would it be a fair characterization? I suppose this is how I've been thinking about it, to see love as this movement up, this inclination towards what is higher ultimately. Because it's a very interesting thing just to notice about our experience. What would it be that would make the oligarch, who is purely ruled by this thymos, this honor-based spirit, to then look even higher than that order of being that they're inhabiting, or the addict who is succumbed to a particular passion to look higher? Yeah. So what do you make of that sort of conception of love?
Sure, yeah. So I think first thing to do is distinguish between two basic uses of the word love that are related, but definitely need to be kept distinct. The one is love as eros, which is love as desire, and in that modality, there's a sort of directional arrow toward me. If I am in a state of desire, right, I want what I want to kind of come towards me, so to speak, in one way or another. Whereas there's also love in the sense of gift. Okay. So I think Karl Wojtyła really nicely defines love as the complete gift of self to the other. Okay. And so there the direction arrow is going out, right? I am pouring myself out somehow for another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now for Plato, I liked your characterization that there's this kind of structure ultimately towards the higher. Eros is this fundamental driving force of all soul for Plato. Everything that has any kind of life is in motion and is moved by Eros.
Mm-hmm.
Eros towards what? Right?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah. Right.
And there's a lot of things that capture that Eros. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately it's all organized in this kind of in tiered hierarchies. You can think of the ladder of love in the
Mm-hmm.
symposium, where so initially I have, this basic bodily sexual urge for, oh, hey, there's a beautiful person over there. And I have an urge towards that person. But then I recognize, hey, there's like a lot of beautiful people, right? And there's this kind of common quality that they all have. So maybe I just have that urge towards, all beautiful people. But then I recognize that there's beautiful states of soul, that then there's the things that make beautiful states of soul beautiful, the sciences and the institutions and the culture that makes a person admirable, and then up and up and up and ultimately towards the beautiful itself, by itself, in itself, right? This
Mm-hmm.
kind of changeless highest core of what is it ultimately that I want? What is it that I'm longing for and striving for, that I want to get for myself? And there's a very difficult question there of, okay, if I'm operating at this one level, what's going to make me go up a level?
Jump up,
What's
yeah.
going to what's going to convert me towards a higher form of love. And I think when we ask those questions, we're always kind of tempted to think about it from our perspective, rightly so, right? We want to think about, okay, well, what could I do to kind of train myself to, reorient and go towards the higher kind of thing? But in most of the cases in Plato, and I think just in life, often the conversion experiences come upon us from the outside, unlooked for, and it's really a form of grace. It's something smacks us like lightning from a clear blue sky. In the Phaedrus, there's the beautiful passage of the lover sees the beauty in the face of the beloved, and he's just gobsmacked. There's this, it hits him suddenly, and like a bolt of lightning, he remembers his origin among the gods, and he remembers something about heaven, and the wings of his soul start to grow, and his back starts to itch, right, as the wings start to regrow. And that's the experience. I think that guy wasn't going along thinking, okay, I'm gonna use this pederastic relationship as a way of elevating my soul. But something happens. You have an experience in the middle of something, right? Or I just had this experience, not to quite that degree, but I was in the Santa Barbara Museum of Art with my wife. I was speaking at a symposium, and we walk in, and kind of there through the hallway, I saw this Turner painting, or sorry, Edwin Church. And it was just this kind of small painting, but even from a distance, it like struck me, it grabbed me. And I think there's something about these experiences that grip you. You weren't looking. I didn't think I was going to see that particular painting. I didn't go to see that particular painting.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even plan to go to the museum. We were planning to walk down the street. We walked past the museum. We're like, hey, tickets are only $10. Let's like go in, So it wasn't some spiritual exercise that I had set up for myself, but it was a converting experience. It was a moment of grace in my life. And so I think that's I think that's what happens, and often we can't take credit for it. We certainly have to utilize those moments when they happen to us, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those moments of grace, they it's connected to what we were saying about value, I think, because there's a way in which um what is worth attending to can kind of pierce through our desire and almost perfect or ennoble it, or there's something of a call to these moments of grace as you were describing that our Eros seems to be responding to, and it can respond in a disorganized and chaotic way, or it can kind of like find like find its telos, or find its end, or there's something of like a homecoming with it.
Mhm.
It's and so you would conceptualize that as a different kind of love, that this sort of coming down, this condescending love to the ascending love of Eros.
Well, I think they're related.
Mhm.
But so in interpersonal love, classically, there are two basic wills that constitute that interpersonal love. The one is the intentio benevolentiae, all right, the intention to do the good of the other, or to want the good of the other. All right. So if I love my wife, then I want her to flourish. And there's something fishy or inconsistency if I say I love you, but basically I just want you to satisfy me, and even if that's at your expense, right? So there's in that way there's this active gift um, that's not there when, say, I simply desire food, right? Wanting to eat food is a kind of eros, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not willing the good of my sandwich in any way, right? I am willing my own good, and I'm doing that by trying to make the sandwich a part of myself. Okay, so I'm absorbing the other, the sandwich, into my I. Whereas in interpersonal love, that intention of benevolence, the intentio benevolentiae, is I want my wife not to be absorbed into me. I want my wife to continue to be my wife, and I want her to flourish as the person that she is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I'm giving myself to her for that project, for her to be completed and to flourish as her own person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there's a second intention, the intentio unionis, right? Which is the intention of union with the beloved object. Because there's something incomplete, and I think everybody has had this experience. If you really love somebody, it's in fact painful. There's a lot of movies about this, right? To say, oh well, I recognize that actually for you to really flourish and for you to have the best future, that's going to have to be apart from me, right? So I'm going to have to set this bird free, basically, right? And th- we understand that that's a tragedy when that happens, and obviously you should prioritize the good of the other person. But wouldn't you want a world in which that person, if you really love the person, that person could flourish and have everything that that person needs, and also you get to be with them, right? That's kind of implied in the very nature of love, that you want the flourishing of the other to also go
Coincide.
along with your flourishing and
Mm-hmm.
be together with them. You want to be one with them. Okay.
Mm.
So
That's very interesting.
ultimately, if if what's at the top of the ladder is loving us and we're loving the object, there's this pull together. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I said, kind of crudely, we can think of the one way of love as an arrow going this way, and the other kind of love as an arrow coming this way. But ultimately, it's not so tidy, right? Because
Yep.
if I'm fully giving myself ultimately to God, okay, and God is giving Himself to me, the at the core of that desire is also a desire that we would be unified. That that not that I would just sort of go off and flourish separately from union with God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And analogously with other interpersonal relationships.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, we're coming to the end of it. One question struck me on the basis of what you were saying there, which was just I was wondering a bit about you. The way you said it was that is in interpersonal love, particularly. Like, I guess the question is, do you feel there's something particularly unique about interpersonal love or the love of the person, which I suppose would be this kind of route von Hildebrand takes regarding this intention for the good and the retention for union? Because you mentioned this experience in the art gallery, and it makes me think like in experiences of genuine worth where there's a genuine, you're beholding a genuine value, there is a kind of willing of the good. um I don't know if there's a willing of the union in quite the same way, but I it seems right in some way to say that if I value something, if truly acknowledge the value of something, a work of art, great story, something that's beautiful, or even just a natural landscape or just creation, like something it's like this is valuable. Um, it seems like I'm willing that it is beyond me, independently of
Mm-hmm.
me, for its own good. Um, I'm less clear whether that desire for
Mm-hmm.
union would be there, but I'm wondering, yeah, if you think those characteristics are unique in some way to interpersonal love, um, or they could be generalized.
Yeah, I think that there's something kind of analogous. It's not the same, obviously, but in the art gallery, there is something where I want the good of that painting sort of independent from me, right? I want it to be preserved. I don't want it to decay. I want it to be kept in good conditions. I want lots of people to see it. I want it to be displayed properly,
Hmm.
because I recognize it as something genuinely valuable, completely apart from whether I get to be around it or not. There's also another part of me that, if possible, I would like to be around it. more, right? You know, and
Yeah,
if it could be arranged
yeah,
that it could be in a wall in my house, you know, and if
yeah,
that really were the best scenario for the painting, which is not likely, but suppose that it were, like, I would like that.
yep,
Right? I want
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I want that union with the painting in that kind of analogous way. Now I will say, so I follow Martin Buber here. I think that the world of man is twofold is the famous, you know, opening sentence of Martin Buber's I and Thou. I think there's a basic fundamental distinction between the I thou experience, where you have a someone relating to someone, versus the I it experience,
mm-hmm.
in which my ego relates to instrumental objects, things in the world. Okay. And I do think that that chasm is fundamental. It's metaphysically fundamental and basic to our experience. So there is ultimately no identity between the desire that I have for a sandwich that is an object in my world that my ego is going to instrumentalize to nutrify myself, and the eros that I experience towards my wife, which we use the same Greek word. Okay. But those are fundamentally dissonant. Okay. However, Buber in that book speaks of something really interesting. He talks about the sub thou, a sub I thou experience, where sometimes, and he relates in his own experience, this apparently was the moment of revelation for him that kind of set him on a path towards his philosophy. As a young man, he was walking down a path and the sun glinted off of a piece of mica, apparently. And the experience of that light in that moment, he experienced the rock as like a quasi someone.
Mm-hmm.
And in I thou, the example, I and thou, the example that he uses is of certain beautiful trees, you know, and maybe we've had this experience where we're
Yeah,
out on a walk, you know, and you see a
yeah,
tree,
yeah,
and it's as though in that moment the world approaches you as the tree, even not just the whole cosmos or the world, but that tree approaches you as someone, and you
yeah.
enter into a kind of I thou relationship with the tree. Now, I think we would all recognize that when we're speaking that way, and lots of poetry is full of that kind of language,
Indeed, indeed.
it's obviously not literally univocally the same experience as looking another person in the eyes, you know, and having that face-to-face encounter with another person. But there's something analogous there. And so that, I think, reveals a dimension of the world that is sub-personal, right? Not
So personal, yeah.
non-personal, but sub-personal. And under the right, you know, conditions is adequately or maybe just best described in those terms.
Yeah, that's very good. I'll have to check out Buber because that's very that's definitely, I agree, it seems like a fundamental distinction. And it's making me think of the Aristotelian soul now, like the vegetative and the animal, and encountering what's seemingly inanimate as somehow ensouled, and encountering it that way.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Um,
I will say important distinction here is that for Aristotle and really the whole classical tradition, soul is just the principle of life. So lots of things can be ensouled without being someone,
yeah,
right? And the category of person, as opposed to simply soul, is really a concept that has a very complex history.
I
And
agree. I agree. I
doesn't really
suppose,
develop at least until the fourth or fifth century,
yeah.
with the Trinitarian notion of hypostasis.
No, fair
So
enough. It was
that's
just a
complicated.
Buber's. It was just Buber's thing about encountering the tree as a thou.
Uh,
Basically, there's yeah, because you could encounter it as an it, right? In a
mhm,
Heideggerian sort of standing reserve kind of way of
mhm,
it's a field of its kind of thing.
mhm.
But I think there's something to that encountering it as a thou that's very important, and it's interesting. Yeah, considering it maybe a sub person is who was that? Sorry, was that Buber's notion of this?
Martin Buber, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he even gestures at the supra-personal, which would be like experiences of angels or something like that. And he doesn't say much about that, but he just says, so you have the I thou mode, which is properly kind of face to face with another person. But he says, yeah, but there's also these subpersonal experiences and these super-personal experiences.
Oh,
And it's
interesting.
in like he takes like 2 pages on it and then moves on. But it's this very rich suggestion that opens up all kinds of possibilities.
Well, you've given me much food for thought there. I'm gonna have a little read into that one.
Good.
Dan, thank you for taking the time. It was wonderful discussing these things with you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, such a rich topic.
Indeed. We should do it again sometime. I love chatting about these things.
I'd love that. Well, thank you so much.